Hey everybody, welcome to Behind the Mirror. I'm your host, Keith Posehn, CEO of Zorus. I got our head of operations, Liem Vuong, with me, and our guest, Eric Potter, founder of OpMethods. This is going to be a fun one. We are talking CRM technical debt today. Awesome. Eric, thank you for joining us today. Glad to have you on the show with Liem and I.
Pleasure to be here. Yeah, I'm really happy to be on the show and talk about everybody's favorite topic of how do we prevent technical debt. There's so much that goes into it. It's it's one of those things that no one thinks about it until it becomes a problem. But how do you actually avoid it in the beginning when you start implementing a net new CRM installation? There's a lot there.
Yeah, totally. And it's like we deal with this with affiliate and referral programs for clients. It's like in marketing AI work that we're doing too. It's just like they've got a CRM that's a mass of spaghetti relationships between all these objects and models, all these different systems operating. And we get in there and we're like, what is happening in here? I mean, Liem, we've seen so much difficulty for companies, and some who have really done super well. They've fixed it. They've gone through. Eric, thank you for working with us on some of these accounts. But I mean, I think that for us today, I'd love to get your take. How do you keep this from happening, especially for our audience? How do we make sure it just, because it's you don't know. It's what you don't know that gets you. And there's so much you don't know that you don't know buried inside these mission critical systems that can just ruin things. So I'd love to learn more about that from you today.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite phrases is go fast and break stuff. I think it's something that you hear a lot in the startup universe. And that's the kind of attitude that also, while it's great from a growth perspective and you really got to attack growth aggressively, that's the kind of mentality that helps build tech debt. Because what you're doing when you're going fast is you're not thinking about the future implications of all the programs that you're implementing, be it in your MAT like a Marketo or a HubSpot, or in your CRM like a Salesforce. There's a lot that goes into the data that drives all these initiatives forward. So something that's really important anytime you're starting a new install of anything relating to your CRM or your MAT, or where your marketing and sales teams are living, is you have to say, okay, what are my business objectives? What are my measurables? And then how do I build the systems? And systems is critical here, to then avoid them colliding and being conflicting in terms of being able to measure my KPIs and being able to actually solve for my business objectives when I'm implementing these things. And what does that really translate to on the ground? That means our data needs to work together across systems. Something that happens very often, especially when we're looking at, marketing programs and sales programs across life cycles, is one department will have one view of how their, consumer lifecycle or prospect lifecycle runs. And then another department will have another version, and that's normal because marketing, they have their KPIs in their lifecycle that they're concerned with. And you have sales that are concerned about their deal funnels. But in a perfect world, you got to unify these things. These different departments need to be talking to each other, and the goals need to be co-developed. We often see that goals are developed in silos, and it's really important, especially as a leader, to be able to reach across departments and work with those individual stakeholders and leaders as part of these projects to say, okay, let's all get together and measure success together, because it's not about marketing being successful. It's not about sales being successful. It's about the business being successful. So taking that business level perspective in making sure that the business and your technology requirements are unified, that's step one. And how do you do that on the ground? It's taking the data points and making sure that the systems are speaking the same language. What kind of business outcome I see a lot that results in technical debt, or a lack of a business outcome, is folks are saying, hey, I need to run this report for the board, or I need to run this report to understand my success this quarter against this program. And they just can't get to the data because the data is just not configured in a way that's conducive to answering the question, because, marketing looks at the world this way, sales looks at the world this way, so they just don't come together. And nothing is worse than not being able to get clean reporting, right? That's one of the major things that I think that people don't think about when they're saying, hey, let's just get this slapped together. It's like, okay, no, we have to measure it. What's success look like? And defining that up front is so critical.
And we've encountered this in a number of places in both large companies and small companies. And it's interesting to me how it's a blind spot often, like proper systems design, proper understanding of like, it's because you can't future proof everything. Like you're early on in your customer journey, it's trying to decide like, oh, how should I structure my data? That's not going to be perfect, but it's almost like maybe the other side of it, the go fast and break things.
It's a foundational. It's like you're building a house. Yeah. It's like building the house. To your point, it's you got to have a set of blocks from a data perspective that you can trust, and then you can build upon. Because it's always okay to go in different directions. Because to your point, no one can tell the future. Everyone's always going to have something that they need to rework at times, but you should always have that bedrock in place that you can build on, so you have that stability.
Mm-hmm. So then, when we think about that, like today, so. Company, we've got a client that wants to launch a referral program, for example, and they've got a lot of like legacy in terms of how they've set things up. And part of it is just, that foundationally, like organizationally, they have not prioritized this kind of really clean understanding of how they should be using the system. Like, what's like one of the first things they should do to fix that?
Usually, like I was saying previously, you just got to get everybody in the same room that actually has a stake in things and start to hear them out and understand, okay, where are your breakages? What struggles are you having as part of your day-to-day within the system? And that often leads you to where you need to go from a cleanup perspective, because you'll say, an end user, for example, will be complaining, saying, oh, I don't know when this demo got booked from this referral, because demos just aren't being tracked consistently. And that data point isn't being tracked. So it's very hard for then sales to say, how successful is this referral program that's actually live or going live? And as part of establishing that referral motion, obviously defining success is super important. So going back and understanding, okay, sales team, let's decide how to track a demo and bring everybody together, make the decision as an organization, document and train. So documentation is really important there. But generally, the way you want to do it is just try to bring everybody together and figure out what everybody's individual pain points are and try to build the picture of where your breakages are, start doing some process redefinition, and then from there, build the system to follow.
Hey, Eric, who needs to be in the room at the beginning? Like what teams? You mentioned sales.
For a referral program, and really anytime you're thinking about, let's talk about referral programs specifically. When you're building a referral program, it's so important. You got to get sales in the room. You got to get marketing in the room. I would also say you got to get product in the room, especially when we're talking about SaaS, because everybody's got to be on the same page. Product is really going to be driving to the technical piece of that conversation. And often that's where a lot of technical debt is. I mean, a lot of organizations, especially in SaaS, having a real-time product connection into CRM or their marketing technology and tooling is not as common as you might see in the enterprise space, or maybe not as common in general as people may think. And obviously product data is so critical to referrals in the SaaS universe. So sometimes it's a gap to close where, it's technical debt in the sense that there's just a blind spot, and we have to solve for that blind spot by actually illuminating that data set in CRM in one way or another. But, following that, then, you have to make sure marketing understands how are we actually pushing this out? How's the communications flowing? And then from sales perspective is how to, playbook wise, how am I going to deal with a referral versus a prospect that's coming in from a contact form? Because it's a different sales motion. So just making sure everybody that is going to interact with that process, every leader that is associated with the process that you're trying to rebuild or refactor, at least for call number one, you need them all in the room so everybody knows what's going on. Because half the time technical debt happens because decisions are made in silos, quite simply.
Yeah, definitely encountered the silo-based decision-making issues. One of the ones too is that, early on, people make decisions like decisions like in the future about like how the way system should work, how the way we should design it, like a data structure, taxonomy of our system, but then they don't actually adhere to it. So I think like you make a great point, like get everybody in the room, but I think is there also an element of like enforcing consistency, saying, no, you do not get to just flout the standards. They're there for a reason and you have to follow them. Because I feel like that's an issue we encounter at times in past clients where we looked and said, well, what are you doing? You have the set of standards for your CRM and you do not follow them.
Yeah, in the RevOps space, that's something we often come in to solve is that organizational disharmony surrounding process. Because to your point, it's easy to say something. It's much harder to get everybody to follow in line. And I think one of the ways that you do that is through documentation and just also I'm a big fan of building systems in ways that force your end users to get data structured in a way that's useful. And for Salesforce, that might mean something like putting in place validation rules, putting in place field requirements, using fun things like screen flows to make sure you're guiding data input, things like that are generally going to put the experience on rails, because I think that is important. Freedom is lovely in many aspects of life, but not quite in data entry.
Okay, so maybe early on in the organization's journey, it's about saying, hey, not only are we going to set like the standards, but we're going to actually put the time in the system to enforce it, to make sure that you can't break the standard, that there are requirements that are in place, because that's going to ensure that a year or two down the line, we're not going to get bit by the fact that our data is not consistent and is not accessible in the way that we need it to be.
Exactly. I'll give you an example that I think is a perfect kind of tech debt problem, at least on the OpMethods side, we solve a lot. And it comes down to something as simple as address values. So often companies, when they begin using their CRM, they don't think that addresses are super important. Obviously, they're very important for sales to get things routed by territory, as it's a very common sales framework. Say initially when you're setting up your CRM, you don't restrict those values and you just allow free text entry for stuff say I put in United States or United States of America, and I'm going to accept all comers in regards for those values. Now, that creates some data taxonomy problems where ultimately things aren't going to be able to effectively align across systems. You can't easily report on where a prospect is located when you're trying to understand your revenue by geography or any other data point by geography. So it's critical to say up front, let's make sure that our address values are standardized. Let's only accept a certain form, long or short, make those decisions right up front. So all those address sets in perpetuity are going to be valuable for territories, for anything else in your business, that's going to revolve around addresses, because it is such a critical data point for a variety of different things.
I think it's at least another interesting thing too. So a friend of mine, we're talking today about AI and, RAG, so retrieval augmented generation, et cetera, and also the notion that you've got to have consistency in your data. And he said something interesting around like your system of record for AI, and then we were talking about context, and we came upon the idea of context of record. And the thing around context of record is say there's a consistent way that we're going to organize ourselves. Because AI, no matter how good it is, does need something, a consistency of context, needs a bigger context window. It needs that data to be usable in a way that it can go ahead and form those connections and weights off of. And if you don't do that, it fails hard. But then what happens is so the same kind of thing happens in CRM. It's like if you're not consistent in that system, if it's not following these standards, any AI tools you want to apply to that are going to fall flat on their face. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would say that it extends so focusing exclusively on AI. Yeah. Everything needs to align across all systems, and in each individual data point, you need to make sure, to your point, that hierarchically everything makes sense, and that within each individual data point, you have consistency of labeling, everything makes sense. But then even beyond AI, if you're trying to integrate a non-AI tool, that's still going to rely on that consistency in your data taxonomy. Because if I'm trying to integrate even something as basic as a chat tool, and I don't have consistency of something as basic as lifecycle stages, then I can't have that tool communicate to CRM to set something to then trigger an action for a salesperson, or have marketing trigger a nurture follow-up. So even those very basic day-to-day business activities become a problem when you don't have consistent data taxonomy between different systems. So it affects everything from your basic integrations all the way up to your advanced AI use cases. And it affects them, funny enough, in exactly the same way.
Hey, Eric, if we rewind even before wanting to implement a referral program, and you're like a senior leader that wants to implement, a CRM system for the first time, what are some other like basic rules or standards that every leader should consider when they're setting this up? Taxonomy is one. What are some other ones?
I'm a big fan of working backwards from KPIs when we're thinking about how do we design data systems and how do we design a CRM. So from an executive perspective, I virtually guarantee you, if you don't have a CRM, you're still running some kind of business level reporting. There's still some KPIs that you care about, and they may not be as complicated as something that would be derived from a CRM, but being able to start with that set of KPIs and then start with, well, I like to call it a wish list, to say, well, I want to know the following things about my business, and I want to be able to measure the following things about my business and report on them, and be it for performance modification on the marketing side, or to help the board understand the performance of the business to attract additional investment. Having that wish list in place is critical, because then we can build the system to be able to answer those questions. So it's almost a gift being able to implement the CRM for the first time, because you have the ability to define what you can learn from your data right at the jump. And that's almost step one, is saying, what does success look like? What do we care to measure across every department? And that's not just a C-level question. That's a question for your marketing director and your sales VP, because everybody has their KPIs, and we need to be able to make sure that their individual KPIs are also measurable. And it's not just a macro data set for measuring business success.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And so I think it's like, where we take that now, like, we've got all these tools, we have a prevalence of additional tools, and this is what I'm really curious your take on. So we have like the beasts in the space. We have like Salesforce and HubSpot. But we also have newer tools like Adio, which I actually find really fascinating. Like, it takes a bit more setup, but really flexible systems. And then we have people just leveraging stuff like Airtable to effectively function like that and gluing a bunch of stuff together with Zapier or whatever. And so we find a lot of legacy systems that they're quick and dirty solutions that functioned. They got the job done for a period of time, but people are relying on them at surprising levels of scale. Thoughts about this that you have, like how to avoid getting bitten by that when you hit a point where suddenly, oh, I've got a real sales organization. Why am I doing my CRM in HubSpot, or not HubSpot, in Airtable or Streak, for example,
or like, Excel?
Thoughts there on like how to avoid that pitfall?
Google Docs, Sheets.
Yeah, any kind of collaborative data tool. But anyway, yeah, I mean, we see that all the time. I can't tell you how often folks come to OpMethods and say, well, I have these 10 spreadsheets that we're powering with Zapier integrations from Google Analytics and things like that. And, at that point, it's more to say, it's really critical to always try to take a step back and say, how can I try to solve my problems in a technology-oriented way? I think that businesses tend to end up in that position because they're not focusing on a metrics-driven environment. Because we all know Airtable and things like that, they're not going to be able to give you answers to business-level questions. They're going to help you operate on a day-to-day basis, but it becomes incredibly challenging to then answer questions about high-level business performance or even individual business units. So taking that analytics-forward approach as a leader, I think really helps drive technology adoption in a business. It also helps to push people in a direction where they start thinking about, how do I solve my problems with technology, and being able to then go out into the marketplace and do evaluations and things like that. That's where we help folks all the time. But step one is really being able to say, A, I have a problem, or B, I am not being technology oriented about this, and I'm trying to fit square pegs in round holes. And it's not working against a system's design is also something I always recommend. If you say Airtable is a great example. It's, I'm trying to build out a CRM like Notion and Airtable, but it's hard. Well, it's hard for a reason, because it's not a CRM. So anytime you feel that level of resistance from your internal technology, where you're fighting it to try to get answers out of it, or you're fighting it to try to just create a clean operational process, that's a big flag for you to go out and say, I should take a technology-oriented approach to this, back up, and then look at how's the market dealing with this problem? Because you're probably too close to it, and you just haven't poked your head out of your foxhole. You know what I mean?
So there's I think a final question for you, Eric. What I'm really curious about is what do you see, what's next? This space has two massive incumbents that we tend to think about. And it has a lot of new entrants trying to really upend things. You have tools like Notion and others that are trying to integrate a bunch of stuff together to consume more of the overall workspace in that sense as well. And you have Google Workspace, which is of course just a massive massive system there that underpins a lot of the general day-to-day. What's like the big opportunity here, both from a perspective of like companies trying to enter the market, but in terms of companies also trying to find the right tools and how to go about this? So if we have like a new CRO that's going into a company with no real CRM to speak of, has this changed? Is there a newer way to approach this? What should they be looking at? What questions should they be trying to answer?
That's a great question. It's in this space with Salesforce and HubSpot being this duopoly. These days, I would say that Salesforce is stagnating. Salesforce isn't bringing to market as many new features, especially features requested by customers, as HubSpot does on a regular basis. Their release cadences are a little bit slower. And I'm even going to say their AI use cases are a little bit exaggerated in the sense of their capability, wherein HubSpot is actually doing an excellent job about pushing new features forward. They're really challenging Salesforce's market space and position in the market by developing a CRM that is damn near on par at this point. You have almost every capability is one-to-one. You have the ability to run HubSpot at scale where, as little as maybe 2 or 3 years ago, if an enterprise grade kind of customer approached me that had hundreds of users in HubSpot, and they might be bumping into some capability issues where you might have scalability problems, but that's not an issue today. It's just generally not a problem with the HubSpot feature sets where they are, which is, it's crazy to see how the landscape has shifted as quickly as it has, but it goes to show that the pace of innovation is really what matters in CRM. Then there's also a lot of different new competitors, like you mentioned Notion and a few others, that are really taking a very different approach to what a CRM is and is simplifying a lot of what I would call rote admin activities leveraging AI. Things like developing reporting by prompt. That's something that even HubSpot is doing these days. Being able to develop content leveraging AI, specifically stuff that you're training a model on with your own proprietary business information to be able to generate things like voice of the customer driven content and things like that are incredibly effective for marketing teams, as well as sales teams being able to automatically create sequences and send them out of. HubSpot is a great example because that's also a capability that tool has these days. So I would say that the next wave of the evolution of CRM, obviously AI is a huge piece of it, but the companies that are going to be able to listen and react to market needs are going to be the ones that are the most successful. And right now, HubSpot is leading the charge in terms of trying to innovate against what people are really looking for, especially on the enterprise side of the house.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for the answers. Thanks for the time, Eric. This was super productive and fantastic session. We're going to get you on here soon and get you on again soon. And thank you again for working with us. Thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm again Keith Posehn, the CEO of Zors. I got Liem Vuong, our head of operations, a good friend of mine too, and Eric Potter, founder of OpMethods. They are your source for HubSpot and Salesforce CRM consulting and more stuff too as you guys grow. So thanks again for joining. Catch you all next week and have a wonderful weekend.